Hello and welcome back to the Make It Work podcast. I'm your host, Kluane Saunders. If you're new here, this podcast talks to inspirational performers making their own work. So join us, learn with us, and let's make it work.
Like, disability has never been made like marketable or like sexy.
In a way, we failed upwards in that a lot of it has been an accident.
When we came to making it, we were like, what's the question that you don't have the answer for?
But we got up and we were just like, here we go. Like, we don't even think you need to change much, actually. You just copy, paste, put that in the text. Great. And then Josh just sunk further and further into his chair.
FlawBored, they got, what is it, 3 approved Arts Council
Now
applications?
we've got
three.
approved Arts Council. And loads of people making shows rely on, I'll have a brilliant idea about my game halfway through rehearsal. Don't rely on that. Prep it, work it out, work, iterate, think.
FlawBored is a multi-award-winning disability-led theater company co-founded by Samuel Brewer, Aarian Mehrabani, and Chloe Palmer. They create meta-theatrical work with dark irreverence, which aims to address complex and uncomfortable issues surrounding identity, which no one has the answers to. Their shows all feature integrated creative access throughout and seek to create an environment where all audiences, regardless of impairments and disabilities, are able to access the same show. So, welcome, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. We thought we would start with a little description of each person just to get the audience to know who's talking. Josh, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Josh. I'm one of the writers of It's a Motherf Pleasure with FlawBored, and I also directed the show. I'm a 5'10" guy. I've got brown hair, kind of stocky build, and grey eyes, we decided.
Grey eyes. Your eyes are grey.
I think my eyes are kind of greyish, aren't they?
Sort of. I would say they were blue.
Jesus
Cloudy sky.
Christ,
A
I've known you for
cloudy
year.
blue sky
Okay.
of eyes.
Cool. Hi, I'm Aarian Mehrabani. I am one of the writers of It's a Motherf Pleasure and one of the 3 members of FlawBoard, and I play Ross in the show. I am a 6-foot Middle Eastern man with thick black hair and a shaved face.
Hello, I'm Chloe Palmer. I am also one of the co-writers and co-founders of FlawBoard. I am also an actor, and can we say the title? Can we swear?
for it. We've had swear words before.
Okay, great. It's a Motherf Pleasure. And I am a 5'8" white woman with brown hair, blue eyes, and freckles. And I play Helen Richardson.
HR.
Great. Well, I suppose I should describe myself as well.
Yeah.
My name's Kluane Saunders. Everyone calls me Clue. I am 5'5". I have long brown hair, green eyes. I'm wearing a leather jacket, which is very off-brand for me. And I'm the host.
Hey.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
great to have you guys here. So I caught your show in Edinburgh, and I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic and very different than anything I'd seen at Edinburgh. So, and I know you guys had great critical acclaim while you were over there.
We tricked some people, yeah.
So I guess as this is your debut performance and it's done so well, I'm so interested to hear where the idea for this show came from.
So, myself, the other elephant in the room, Sam is not here. So there is a.
Hang on, did you just say Sam is the elephant in the room?
Well, no. So the show is there are 4 writers, and Sam is the other, Sam Brewer, who is also in the show, and he is another. I'm visually impaired or legally blind, just as some context for those who haven't seen the show, and so is Sam. So me, Sam, and Chloe met at drama school. We went to Central together, graduated in 2020. And me and Sam are very different people. Like, Sam is Australian, and he moved over to the UK to start drama school when he was, I think, 25. And I moved from the north of England down to London when I was 18. Very different people, but we were sort of lumped together because they were like, be friends, you're both blind. So we sort of like were a marriage of convenience. And in January of 2021, nothing was going on because there was a lockdown. And I remember Sam calling me and saying, I've got this idea for a show or a thing that we could make. Because Sam had listened to a podcast by Navarro Media.
Yeah.
That's the one. Where they were talking about the influencer industrial complex, which was about how like influencers now are like they have agents and like influencing is a full-time job, but like not like influencing like activism. That's it.
Like political
Political influencing and activism. So thinking about the Black Lives Matter resurgence in 2020, you'd have people who were selling like fuck cop bracelets, but like not donating any money to like legal funds. It was all just to make money. So like there was the notion that like often political movements and marginalized communities have parts of their identity taken by mainstream culture. Apart from disability, like disability has never been made like marketable or like sexy. So Sam sort of had this idea of making a satire of like somebody who worked in a PR agency trying to make like the idea of blindness really mass market. And we had trained with Chloe at drama school. And Chloe had been helping both of us with self-tape, some sort of the go-to person because we just really love working with her. And brought Chloe on board. Yeah, she's great.
Prepared line.
Yeah, I've been saying that line.
I blackmailed you to say that.
And yeah, so we started developing the show. We started out with we're really lucky. We got a bit of funding to pay us for a week, and we had a week of space with Wildcard and Watermill Theatre to like R&D and develop the show. Then we ended up getting loads of support. We had support from Cryptic and the Barbican, Theatre Delhi, Camden People's Theatre,
which in of itself is referenced in the show.
It's referenced, ludicrous amount of Pleasance, and then
we got the first. To like the end of the show is basically about how we're this company who have come from nowhere. Nobody knows of our work, and yet we're getting recommended by Lynn Gardner, who we know for a fact at the time that she recommended us had not seen our work. So the level of support that we got was, it was brilliant. We're very lucky, but it's also hilarious because like, you know, Wildcard and Watermill, we were supposed to be a company to get that support. And we just said, oh yeah, we're a company.
This is an accident.
It was like most of what we've achieved, we feel like in a way we failed upwards in that a lot of it has been an accident. And there's a lot of like internal interrogation that happens about like how much did we just have a stellar idea, which I think hopefully we're coming round to the idea, you know, actually we've got to back ourselves. You know, we have made a hilarious show. It's satirical and we think we've hit into something that people aren't talking about. But also a lot of our early opportunities were afforded to us probably because of this term that we've coined able anxiety.
Yeah.
Which is sort of so to kind of step through, you know, within a year or 18 months. And again, this forms the end of the show. FlawBored, they got what was it, 3 approved Arts Council applications?
Now
we've got 3 Arts Council applications. For one show, you know, going forward. And I think, we, you know, not all of those applications were the best applications. And so what you got is this really potent sort of environment where you have a non-disabled funding public who are desperate to get things right and they want to do the right thing. But the education around disability is so poor that what happens is that they get told, well, the thing you should do for disabled people is X. And whatever it is, they go, right, well, I'll do that. I won't really question why, but I will do that thing. Just in the same way that in any moral panic, the thing you should do around people of color is X. The thing you should do around women is X, you know. And so you get these behaviors that are beautifully ripe for satire because they're so knee-jerk and unthought through. And so there's this character, Helen Richardson, in the play, who does a lot of those knee-jerk things and is constantly trying to sort of remember what she said in the workshop and so on. But the irony of all of that was that was then happening in real life, in that it seemed, whether this was true or not, we're probably being a bit unfair on the Arts Council, but it seemed like all we really had to do was go, oh, by the way, and 2 of our company are also legally blind.
Yeah.
At which point they said, yes, how much money would you like?
We really like nailed the. I mean, like even though the some of the applications weren't necessarily the like most eloquent, we sort of nailed the art of the application form in terms of like hitting on the project we were making really fit into the cultural zeitgeist at the time. And I think currently, like, there's a lot of support out there for disabled-led companies. We really want to make a show that was irreverent, that sort of integrated disabled and non-disabled creatives, that was having this conversation. So, like, and we had a line in our that we like, and at the end of all of our application forms, which was, I think it was something like over time, disabled stories have been told by non-disabled people. Why not let us take control of the narrative for once? ? And it's like, essentially, if you don't give us money, you're ableist. But then I think
we should also jump in and say that all of the funding for disabled-led companies over the last few years is
important.
a very good thing.
It's
a massively good
Yes.
thing. We are at no point saying it's a bad thing. We're just saying that the sort of lack of depth of thought from non-disabled people about they just sort of give the money and pat themselves on the back in this kind of very knee-jerk way.
Which
So
but
that's
also we
specific.
have been supported very generously by the people in those venues as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to separate like the funding body or like the kind of image of a venue or image of a funding body from like the actual people that help
so
you
people
with
like
those
James
things.
Metziard at Wildcard, David Byrne at the New Diorama,
David
Ralph at Theatre Daily. Like there's
Nick
people who
Pleasant,
are completely brilliant.
Jamie Hale,
Yeah.
like
Jamie Hale,
many people that have been supported
But I guess
by
on
and Camden People's Theatre.
Yeah. But on the like the progression of the show and the development of the show, I think that is also a real key, because if that idea that Sam originally had, if just the three of us started making it, it would have been real bad. Like the show that like the little bits that we made after that like 1 week R&D, we had a language, but it wouldn't have been a good show. It would have been exhausting
And
to
is
watch.
this when Josh came on
Well,
board?
so
Well, what
so,
we did was we got money and hired people who are better than us.
So we had
We
the art
thought we
council.
were the shit. Like we got up on first day of R&D. So basically we got our first round of funding in like we did our first R&D August 2021 and we got up like day 1, day 2 and was like, here we go. Here is our award-winning
2022,
material.
August 22.
22.
Yeah,
Here
that's
is our 15 minutes of award-winning material. Award-winning. We won an award with Les Enfants Terribles and Greenwich Theatre. But we got up and we were just like, yeah, here we go. Like, we don't even think you need to change much, actually. You just copy, paste, put that in the text. Great. And then Josh just sunk further and further into his chair. We looked up like kids that were like, yeah, did you like that? And everyone was silent. We were like, oh, God, we've got a lot of work.
I mean, this is no surprise to you guys, but it was terrible.
But that's the thing. I think by hiring people and like getting the money to bring people in that are better, we were able to really, I think, like elevate the conversation we were having. So it isn't just about like, oh, what happens if you monetize disability? It's about like through conversations with Josh and Chloe, their experience of how they interact with disabled people. And like, actually that's the real strength of the show. Cause like, yes, on the surface, you've got me and Sam who are there as like, you never see disabled people being bastards and like being manipulative and whatever. But our real success of our show and something we're really proud of is that the audiences are a real diverse like mix of disabled and non-disabled audiences. And what allows that to happen is the fact that we have Helen Richardson, Chloe, who is there of like, they can recognize how they act around people with disabilities or just any form of diversity in general. Like when race is brought up, they can recognize how Helen deals with it and how she approaches it. And that, I think, really enriches the show.
Can I also just say that Josh has never sat down and told us to our face that
was bad,
We all laugh about it, but it's on a podcast being told that right now. I'm ashamed.
I think there's something interesting to talk about there, actually.
What did draw you to the project
Money.
initially?
You're an employer.
Yeah, give the honest answer. Come on.
I will give the absolute honest answer. I mean, at the point at which the opportunity came around, I met with the guys and interviewed for it. And then they said, we would love you to work with it. And I'm putting it really bluntly, I had 2-3 weeks in August, not much work, and needed the money. So
I like that. That's very honest. Good.
And but also, I think there's any shame in saying that either. Like,
No,
I think
of
more
course.
artists should say it. And also, I hadn't devised for about 4 or 5 years. So I'm a little older than the company and have been directing professionally for a little bit longer. And so I hadn't devised for many, many years, and I'd said I was rubbish at it because my experiences of devising had gone very badly. And so I was quite interested to do the 2 weeks. But what was really interesting was that I think what the company were looking for was a bit of a new writing dramaturg director, which is also more of my experience. But what was really intriguing about it was that I'd been really interested in my own about access languages just as purely creative things. So, BSL, for example, is a form of language through movement. It is also a language that is needed in the world and another thing as well. But theatrically, it's very interesting. Audio description is in Shakespeare. If you think about when Gloucester's about to fall off the cliff and somebody tells you this is a cliff, you're about to fall off, and so he believes them and falls, and then they save his life by that. It's just audio description used to create imagination. So I was really interested in those ideas. And then the underpinning of the idea that the company had of what happens if you try to monetize disability and the way that identity politics is manipulated by people for different reasons. And I think also Aarian and Sam and Chloe were the first people I've spoken to in a while that were prepared to call that out and therefore lose a bit of their own sanctity for calling that out and laughing at it. Whereas I think at that moment, my joke is that the only minority identity I'm part of is that I was privately educated, right? Apart from that, I am a white, straight man from the south of England. So, the way that being in a majority identity, you then sort of operate to minority identities, you're in this position that's very interesting, but I was never able to make any work about it because we were at a time when the representation of those identities was so important that it really wasn't my time to talk. And then so when this came along, it was like, no, there is a way you can be useful in this conversation. Your anxiety is part of the matrix in this. So I thought the conversation underneath it was really interesting. But then yes, I'm afraid the execution wasn't great. But then, it was the first 15 minutes of a new company's first show. So it was not
award-winning material.
So tell me about the actual, you were talking about devising there from award-winning material. But devising, what did your process look like in the rehearsal space or the R&D, I guess?
That was, during the interview process with Josh, I think that was one of the main things that drew us to Josh, because we trained on a devising course at Central.
Yeah.
So we were sort of like, we were under the impression that we were going to like devise the entire show and make the whole show. And Josh's background is as a new writing director of dramaturg, and essentially came to us and said, look, I'm not a deviser, but what devising does is has lovely images, great like sweeping ideas, but the structure is almost always like not the strongest, and the dialogue can tend to suffer. So we found that like our process of essentially going in and devising, Josh led us through a process of finding a central question for the show. We then did a lot of improvs around scenarios that sort of surrounded the question, not really worrying about where it fit in the show, but just sort of like improving and then seeing whether those things would fit, stitching those things together. And then we had a work in progress showing, which was sort of a bit rough around the edges and was a sort of fourth wall version of the show. And then after we did that, Josh said, what you don't need now is another 2 weeks of R&D where you can devise. He's like, you need to now refine what you've got and flip the switch into being devisers, into new writing directors. And that was the most useful thing that I think you've ever said.
I think the other thing is as well is like the really great thing about devising is the ability that it has to generate a lot of material, and you can just generate so many ideas. And if you're not too beholden to like the work and the seriousness of it, you can just chuck so much stuff around a room and just see what sticks. And like we had this thing where we were like, okay, great, that seems really funny and that seems really good to us, but we'll see if it survives the night. So like we'd go home thinking about something and thinking something was a great idea, and then we'd come in the next day and we'd all look at each other and be like, we loved it yesterday, but I don't think it survived the night. And like the whole of the Access loophole scene at the very beginning, where basically you've got the three characters of Sam, Chloe and Aarian trying to make an accessible show for the audience. And they obviously tie themselves in knots. That was born out of a conversation that we have always kind of had about differing access needs and what happens when one person needs something that is the complete opposite to what somebody else needs. But that came out of like an improv and devising, and like the only stimulus I think was like, okay, in this room now, you have to make this room as accessible as possible for everyone that's in here. And then Josh would be like, oh, I need more light. So then we'd run around like absolute clowns, like trying to make, and we were like, this is funny. This is really funny. And like, I think for us, it was a real moment when we came in the next day or the day after or something and tried it and realized that it did survive the night and there was real legs in that. And then what we did was take that idea away and script it.
Okay.
So we spent probably like, you know, a good couple of hours chucking this idea around, and then went home and like really diligently scripted it, came back in. And I think, to be honest, that's probably the scene that has changed the least in a way.
Yeah. I think it's also like, it's about, to an extent, keeping the standard as high as you can keep it for as long as you can keep it while you generate as much as you can. So I think like, I could go for ages on this and I won't, but I think there is a really, really damaging narrative about any art creation and this idea of inspiration and genius. The idea that you create something and it's brilliant and you know it's brilliant. It's rubbish. Like every other, I think it's rubbish. Every other industry anywhere understands that you progress by iterating. You just produce one trainer and another one and another one and another one, and then you work out which one sells, and then that's the one you keep producing. And I think with devising and with writing, you can get to a point where you go like, this feels the best to me. And it's like, that's not relevant at all. What is relevant is, how does the audience feel about it? Are they still laughing 2 days later? Does it still work? Then it's good. That's the only bar. And so if you can keep the standard really, really high and continue to generate and just see if you can get anything over that bar, and anything that gets over the bar survives. Everything else is just, you know, because one, you've got to do the other 9 ideas so that the one idea that gets over the bar makes it. And so you can do that in devising quite easily. But then in writing, what we had was, it was fortnightly or weekly meetings? Fortnightly.
Yeah.
So every Tuesday evening, I think it was, they would all, the 3 of them would all have writing tasks, and I was basically an editor, and I would basically go, yeah, those 5 lines work, that one doesn't. And so again, I was like, there's not quite a nice relationship of me being a bar that the group had to clear, and then the 3 of them all also then pushed each other and then like tweak and stuff. So
Which
is
that
also
was
like,
kind of the basis of the process.
Yeah, and I mean there were moments as well, especially like where the material at the very beginning was very like audience focused and very like interactive in a way, and we felt like we were missing that in the work in progress thing, and we came back and we had a whole conversation about that. So it's like between the 4 of us, one person can bat something to one person and then they can bat it back and we can work out which one sticks. So it's like, I don't know, just the way in which we kind of slot together.
No, you're totally right. I was working with Maria Rayberg, who's a brilliant sort of European British director in her style, and we were saying like the only really alchemical thing about making theatre is that moment in the room where you go, that works, and I don't know why it works, like, but it works. And so all you're really trying to do is create the conditions to do that, to do the thing that you don't really understand. And so sometimes you would have like, if you can chuck it between 3 people and then the third person goes, oh, that worked. Now we've got it. You know, you're just trying to create situations where you can iterate, because then the law of averages will mean that something's going to work. and then look, that can go in the show.
And then does that change when you get it in front of an audience?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
there's still stuff now that we're like, oh, this feels so sticky.
Yeah.
I mean,
The script is published now. Nothing we can do.
I guess that's the real, like, so we had our first work in progress, which was in September last year at Greenwich Theatre, which, like, getting that in front of an audience and seeing how an audience reacted really let us know, like, what worked, what our strengths were, and what we needed to do, so we could then go and have those fortnightly meetings where we switched into new writing mode and really, like, the script like had its massive change then. But then we've been very lucky that the show has kept getting picked up. So we premiered the version of the show, like the actual show, at Vaults at the beginning of the year, and then it was transferred to Soho for 3 weeks pretty soon after. And that gave us a really great opportunity to be like, okay, the majority of this worked at Vaults because it was transferred to Soho. So, like, it worked. But there were certain bits that were like, that line always felt awful to say. Like, I knew that didn't feel natural, that felt weird. So it was about tweaking those. But there was a whole scene that at Vaults were like, that scene doesn't quite work. So we rewrote it. And
Which scene was that?
scene, I had a full-on apology after Maya Angelou and Audre Lorde.
That was still.
In Vaults,
of course.
I read the full apology.
Yes.
See,
So
there you
what
go.
we now
You
call
completely.
So we then
But in that
rewrote an entire scene
Yeah.
where, like, I think it's the funniest scene that is now on the show.
I do think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think.
Well,
Access. Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
So
We can argue about that for ages.
Like, that was Soho. Then we went to Edinburgh, and again, between Soho and Edinburgh, there was more like, okay, so what in Soho was painful to do? There was this one bit, which
Also,
was like
if I might jump
yeah,
in, at Soho it was 1 hour and 10, and we were so sure we couldn't cut anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we cut it down to the hour it had to be for
Yeah.
Edinburgh, and lo and behold, it's better. And now we would never go back to the Soho version.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, again, because that audience bar is high. It's higher than the one you have for yourself, because the one that you have for yourself is mollified by your own anxiety about wanting it to be good. Now an audience comes in and they don't want it to be good. Like, they do in the sense that if it's good, they're going to be delighted. But if it's rubbish, no skin off their nose. It's not painful for them if it's rubbish. Whereas if
Well,
for
it
you
could
in a
be.
rehearsal room,
Depends
depending on
how
rubbish.
bad it is.
I just mean, they've got no skin in the game in the same way as you do as creators. So
Sure.
your bar of how high you can look for quality is kind of held back by the fact that you're scared of it being bad. Whereas an audience, if it's bad, they'll just tell you it's bad, or they just won't laugh, or whatever it is. And so then that bar jumps up again. And again, that's really useful, which is why preview is so useful, because then you're like, right, well, that's where we're aiming. That's where we're aiming. Yeah.
Speaking of audience reactions, your piece is obviously very thought-provoking. And it wants, I think from an audience perspective, you want to make your audience think and to question
Yeah.
and to think about how they've behaved in certain situations, maybe that HR finds herself or if, you have a very wide range of audience, don't you? So is that a consideration, the balance of making an audience think, but also keeping them engaged and entertained? Was that something you considered in the process?
Yeah.
That's why it's a comedy, I think, because it, like, if it wasn't, it'd be really easy to have these conversations, and a lot of work that tries to engage in those conversations are great pieces of work, but they are quite earnest. And by virtue of them being quite earnest and being quite serious conversations, you engage a very particular type of audience. And it's a type of audience that are already engaging in those conversations, either can relate because they're maybe disabled themselves, or are really like a sort of a bit like Helen, like, I want to go to every workshop, I want to go to every show, I want to engage with these things. And we wanted to engage a wider audience. And the way to do that was to make it, first and foremost, a comedy that entertained audiences, so that when people talked about it, they went, this is just a funny show.
Yeah.
And they almost forgot about the conversations that we tricked them into having. So we tricked them into
secret
engaging
workshop.
with
Yeah.
the issues.
I think there's something else in that. We're doing a little bit of R&D for our next show now, and trying to, as Aarian said, when we came to making it, we were like, what's the question that you don't have the answer for? Which I think is really important, because I think there's a lot of questions where you can go like, I'm trying to think of whether there's one from the R&D we could share, but there's a questions where you go, oh, that's an interesting question. You go, yeah, but you do actually know the answer. Like, you take something, a question like, is identity important? Interesting question, but you do know the answer. The answer is yes. It's pretty obviously yes. And so that's an interesting question for an article. It's not a great question for a show.
Right.
Whereas the question for Mother Pleasure was what happens when the needs of identities collide. So wasn't it?
How do identities talk to each other?
How do identities talk to each other?
That was like a sub-question of that.
Okay. So how do identities talk to each other? And nobody could answer that. There's lots of interesting things around it. But if it's not answerable, you can in good faith write both sides of an argument.
And just to clarify, what are identities in this question?
Well, every identity.
Okay, just how you identify.
So we spoke like my identity as a woman in relation to like Sam's identity as a man. And then you have those tricky intersections because like in many ways I would be a minority being a woman or would be considered to be marginalized in that way in certain spheres, but then he would be considered marginalized because of his disabled identity. So there's so many different factions of a person's identity. I mean,
even within disabled identities, like in the first scene, the fact that like you've got the BSL or the captions, the jokes come up in the captions, oh shit, they need to be audio described. So like those two identities immediately conflict. And then you get later on in the show the really sicky but uncomfortably true issue of how do the identities of disability, particularly vision impairment and blindness, collided with race, because there's actual things that we don't talk about because it's uncomfortable, but like there's sticky ground when both communities can't have the conversation because you both want to say them do the right thing, but you're like, can we just have a good faith conversation? And
I think it's a question that's so hard to answer because the advocacy for each identity is so important, but then the conversation with the other identity is how the advocacy happens. So like there's no point, do you know what I mean? You can't as a I don't know, I haven't got an identity to talk to you, but I imagine as a disabled person, you advocating with other disabled people about the access in the world, you're talking to people who agree with you. So in order to then actually advocate for that further, you have to talk to people who don't necessarily agree with you, at which point identities are going to collide. And immediately one person's going to feel guilty or anxious and another person's going to feel, either guilty for having asked or presumptuous or something. And so and those are all the conversations where pleasure just like ties the audience in knots. And the point is, we don't let you out because we don't know the answer either. Yeah. That's the point.
Yeah.
I mean, there's external identities as well, but there's also internal identities where Josh talks about like, I'm a white man who is like non-disabled who X, Y, Z. For me, I'm like, well, I'm disabled. I'm also Middle Eastern heritage. I'm also privately educated and come from a middle-class background. Like all of those things really conflict sometimes. But like sometimes I'm like, well, yes, I am disabled, but I'm aware of my privilege that allows me to do certain things that like, if I wasn't, then like, and they're like the identities can conflict and talk to each other within an individual, which is why at the end I like have the bit of like, yes, I am of Middle Eastern heritage, but throw a caramel latte over me, my brown washes off to reveal a core as white as driven snow. Like, because yes, I am Middle Eastern heritage, and I guess that gives me cover to make, which again is part of the conversation of the second show, but like it gives me cover to make certain jokes and say certain things, but like strip it back and I'm like, but I don't have the identity as somebody who grew up in the Middle East or like has like I grew up in a very British environment and my parents were very like, be British.
So you were talking about accessibility just then and kind of you were talking about the loophole that at the start it's like, how do you make something accessible to every single person in an audience? How are we doing in the UK with accessibility? I guess there's probably one person I should ask about this. And I know it's one of those things I can't, you obviously can't speak for the entire disabled community on that.
Well,
and that's the point of the scene.
Exactly,
You can't, right. So this is really tricky. And I want to be really careful that I'm, first off, saying that I am not speaking on behalf of all disabled people. Yep. I'm not speaking on behalf of all blind people. I am speaking on behalf of Aarian. Okay?
My views
now-
are in no way associated with the company. My views are my own.
Before he starts speaking, I'd just like to say if he says anything awful, I'm not associated with him either.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a really long way to go, and there's a lot of things that need to happen. However, there is a thing that myself and Sam were very lucky to be invited to a few weeks ago, which is called the Blind People in Theatre Conference, which is it's a conference that happens biannually in Croatia, and is a place where all these. I'm not going to tell the stories. Don't worry. I'm going to be really diplomatic. This is fine.
I've just remembered there's cameras though, so I need to not.
Yeah, because they don't.
Edit it out.
I did some things. Anyway, so it's a biannual conference where delegates from around the world and their blind, the sort of blind theatre companies all come together, and they have conferences and they have talks, and they talk about their practice and what it's like to make work in their country. And me and Sam were invited as guests of Extant, the visually impaired theatre company in the UK, to go alongside a couple of other people, Alice and Ben, Alice Christina Corrigan, Ben Wilson, and I believe it's Antonia from the Lowry, who's been supporting Extant, and Louisa from Extant. So we all went. And the UK has a long way to go. But when sort of in talking to the other companies from around the world, you realize that actually we are in a lot of ways like quite far ahead in terms of integration. So for example, in some parts of the world, like blind people don't run theatre companies. They don't have professional positions in the arts. Like blind theatre for the blind, like made by and for the blind, is very much a charity thing. It's something that is like a charitable thing. These people have jobs, like normal jobs, and then in an evening once a week, or like however frequently, they go to a club or they go to a thing, they make a show for the blind. In some countries that we were told they aren't allowed to charge tickets for it. So when we were talking to them about like our funding and like how we get funding and the fact that we can make money through ticket sales and fund certain things through ticket sales, they go, well, we aren't allowed to sell tickets for art made because it's a charity thing. We aren't allowed to sell tickets for it. And like in some places, there are rules that like by virtue of the rules that govern, I guess, training of actors and training of people professionally, it's essentially impossible for blind people to be trained as actors. So like I was before that trip, I would have gone, there's a long way to go in the UK, and there definitely is. But I also feel an obligation to go, we're doing good, which isn't to be like, hey, we can sit back, but also to go, let's look at the rest of the world and also figure out how we might be able to help. But in the UK, there are real strides being made in terms of accessibility. There's certain things are, I guess this might be a bit problematic.
I was thinking you've been very measured and calm, careful so far.
But yes, I'm really treading careful. There are some conditions or certain access provisions which I guess are more palatable than others, right? So having, I won't talk about the palatable ones, but like creating integrated audio description, or having captions that are open, or BSL. If you aren't skilled in your integration of those things, they can appear clumsy and they can appear like something that is just overlaid. And it's, for a lot of audiences, they go, oh, why'd you do that? Why'd you have to describe all the things? And it's like, well, the reason why those things are described is because we need them. And if the moment it's open, or like it's coming out the speakers for everyone, everybody realizes how awful it is. So our show, the AD is audio description, is integrated into the script. So our show's sort of got two levels of it. There's the integration in the script, and then we sort of take the piss out of the nature of audio description. But because you integrate it into the script, it is integrated into the language of the show. if audio description isn't integrated, it's often done by an external company that is usually for a couple of performances in a run. It's usually a matinee because they assume that disabled people don't work. And they'll come in, the external company, they do great work, but they won't have any creative input into the show. The show will have been made. The director will have probably left and be on the next project. The audio describer comes in, goes, cool, this is what needs describing. And the blind people all wear headsets, and the audio describer sits at the back with a microphone describing everything that goes on. This is awful for drama because it cuts through any tension. Like if there's like an argument, shouting, and then somebody, like this is a silent moment, someone slams a cup on a table, the tension's cut because all the blind people hear is, he slams the cup on the table. Comedy's even worse because comedy's all about timing, and like audio description just cuts through punchlines because it's not integrated into the routine of it. So I guess like we're starting to move into a place where theatres are realizing that by integrating access elements, and in order to do that, you have to engage with, there's a lot of great professional creatives who are from those communities who need those access languages.
So I think that's, sorry to jump in, but I think that's really, really key as well as a non-disabled creative working with that. Like the level of my ignorance when starting the job was very, very high, you know, in terms of like just not understanding the fundamental statistics around blindness as well. And I'm not gonna say this right, so correct me if it's wrong, but it's something like, is it 6% or 7% of blind people can see nothing? Can see nothing.
I don't know the percentage. It's a single digit percentage.
It's a single digit percentage. Whereas my
nothing,
perception as an ignorant, non-disabled person walking in was that blindness meant the blindness I had seen in films, basically. And so once you get educated on that, so if before that, had I gone, I'm going to put audio description into a show that I'm making because as a non-disabled person, I want to make it accessible, I would have just gone to try and describe every possible thing I could. And I'd have gone, how on earth could this creatively be integrated into the thing I'm making? It would have just seemed like I can't do it. And so there really is no way other than to involve people from those communities, you know, because as soon as like Aarian and Sam, you know, like were there, you could then, as a group, you're free to actually find creative routes because there's somebody going, yeah, that'll work, that won't work. And even then we invited another, no, actually they were there on a placement. I've forgotten their name now, but there's an assistant director. Lily, that was it. Yes. Lily, who came in to sort of see the process and learn a bit. I think they're a kind of emerging director. And their visual impairment was different to Sam and Aarian's. So we could then ask them as well, how's this feeling accessible wise? And then it gets really creative because you can go, oh, there's wriggle room in there. I can do this. That can be fun. We can play with it. But until that point, you're so bound up with fear because you don't understand that it's impossible for it to be creative, I think.
I think the other thing as well is sort of the reverse of what we said in the beginning is like, it's amazing that those funding opportunities are there and that, you know, funding bodies like Arts Council are placing high importance in making your work accessible. But what is, I'm going to be diplomatic about this, what can be quite tricky about that is the lack of information people have. So in order to make their work, in order to even be able to make the show, they go, okay, well, I'll make it and I'll make it accessible, which can be good. But sometimes that can happen without the consultation of people who need those access languages. So it's that, again, that other tricky grey area of like, you know, it's not like it's not like you should not be actively making an attempt to make your work accessible, but it's about doing it in the right way.
I think that's the other tricky area, right? Because again, it'd be very easy for somebody to be like, oh, shut up, be grateful for what you've got. But, and like, again, if like having just talked about the rest of the world in the Blind in Theatre conference, the BIT conference, it's like we had to wear t-shirts, it's great. Like talking about that, it's like, well, you're in the room, just be grateful. But I would argue the next step is like, we are like, we'll get like myself and Sam will be invited into rooms as audio description consultants to like consult on the audio description of a project, but we are trained theatre makers and like are award-winning writers and published playwrights and comedians and do the so like
And actors.
yeah, so like if you just have a creative team of people who are a diverse group of people, they are then able to like have input that is not just limited to access. Because like there's a lot of rooms that I'm like, I'm grateful to be in the room, but you don't care about any of my other creative opinions other than if it has something to do with access. And there's nothing, and again, there's also other things of like, okay, you brought me in as a quote unquote deviser, but all you're essentially looking to me for is access elements. And like it's those processes that I get invited on that are really exciting, that make me that are where I am valued as a creative. And I guess I am the one that goes, have you thought about this for audio description? Have you thought about this for integrating access? Rather than me being looked to for like, Aarian, how are we doing? Come on, we need to report back to Arts Council.
Yeah.
Like,
And so what is the next project? You talked about it a little bit, the second show. What's that going to be about?
Trying to make it as good as the first one.
that's not
failing miserably. But also, we're not neurotic people.
No, God no. Well, it's interesting. We never thought this show. I mean, nobody could have thought this show would go as well as it has.
You were just doing it for 2 weeks of pay.
I was just doing it for 2 weeks of pay, and here I am a year later. And so, and there's something alchemical about it. Like it was these guys' first Edinburgh, but it was my sixth, and it wasn't my sixth because the other 5 went brilliantly well. So you're kind of. I think at the moment we're just trying to find the question that we don't know the answer to again. I think we're quite interested in a few different ideas. One of them is the idea of cover. So the idea of like, if say, and again, this isn't the show, but it was a thought experiment we were doing the other day. Say you open a show and you say, this show has been made in consultation with, it's about, we were talking about Australia, weren't we? So it was made in consultation with Indigenous Australians. Right. And then you start telling a story. And then halfway through, you take away half of that cover. You say, maybe this has only been made with male Indigenous Australians. Okay. And so everyone then starts looking back at the first third and they go, oh, hold on. And then you say, well, actually, all of the Indigenous Australians that we consulted were over the age of 40. So this actually doesn't have anything to do with young Indigenous Australians either. And so if you give audience cover and everyone sits back and goes, great, I can listen to this safely. So what happens if you start taking that away? And then eventually you get round to the point of like, well, it was just a sign on a board. Why did that make you feel safe? Like, and why do you feel safe hearing some things when you believe they're from particular voices? When you don't feel safe when they come from different voices, even though the fact might be the same. We don't know the answer to that, because obviously you can see some parts of it where you go, well, obviously that person's allowed to tell that joke because of X, Y, or Z. But you also go, but the joke is still the joke, isn't it? Isn't there an objective truth about the joke that, and so that's quite interesting. It
comes from because also it happens in It's a Motherfucking Pleasure. Like at the start of we didn't originally have, in our first work in progress, we didn't have this line, and then we added it because we're like, we probably need to let people know that me and Sam are blind. So at the start of the show, I say, myself and Sam are legally blind, and that gives the audience permission to go, they're allowed to make the jokes because whatever. Can you imagine if at the end of the show we weren't just fucking with you, we can see, and then just everyone would go, I don't know what to think because I've been laughing. But everyone, bar this one woman at the new Diorama Theatre, just accepts that we're blind and goes, yeah, cool. They've told me they are, and I feel comfortable laughing because they are. Yeah.
There was one woman at that show that came out and then complained to the box office that it was terribly offensive because clearly Sam and Aarian could see.
And they were, I remember
the box office person was going, I don't know what to tell you. They can't.
They were like, I played my trump of going, they are blind. And she was like, no, but they can't. And they were like, I played my trump card. I've told you that they're blind. There's nothing else I can do.
Yeah. I think we're just interested in trying to find the same point that we got to and trying to get into that very sticky place with something that we can't answer.
Yeah. So what work out there now is inspiring you as a company, or what has? Are you drawing inspiration from other companies, or?
So I've got a little thing that I saw yesterday, which I know Chloe's seen as well, that I thought was great.
Did you see the flea?
The flea.
And you
at
liked
the yard.
it?
I did.
Yes.
And the reason I
told
liked it is
you.
because there is a creeping monochromatic set disease that is going through all of British theatre at the moment, where you keep seeing these shows and you go, where's all the colour gone? And everything's monochromatic and stark and brutal. And I think it's probably a COVID something, I don't know. But it seems to be around as like, and theatre loves a moment, loves a trend. Remember that moment when it was all neon boxes because of Ivo van Hove? And, the flea at the yard, I saw yesterday, is like the opposite of that. It's like, it did a really good job of being colourful, mad, OTT, kind of Vivienne Westwood, big costumes and like maximalism. But then it was playing in caricature, but the scenes within the caricature were also very moving, which, because you thought like, oh, this is just going to become a sort of like League of Gentlemen, you know, big, massive, overblown thing. But actually, and mainly because the acting was so good, actually, Nora Lopez Holden was incredible. But also the guy, Connor, I've forgotten his second name. Connor Finch was brilliant. And then Scott Carron was there, was being brilliant. Anyway, because of this quality of the acting, they managed to hold both. And I watched it and just went, I haven't seen something like that in ages. It's not afraid. And what was also great, last thing with that, which was also great, was that it is about the illegality of gay male sex in the 1890s.
Right.
But the story was a mother and son story. And the politics just sat behind it. It was still there. Everybody still understood and thought about it. But I think in the last few years, it's been very rare that you see a show where the politics doesn't sit right on top of the play. And you kind of go, okay, yeah, I get it. Stop. I'm here to feel stuff, not think. You know?
Yeah.
To see it. Where's Park?
At the yard.
At the yard.
Did I say the
They've
park?
extended.
No, I just.
They've just extended as well, so you've got plenty
I
of
need to.
time.
But I think that's also, I think, the strength of the four of us in the company. We have very different tastes.
So different.
Like me and Chloe will almost definitely leave a show and like have different opinions. Like
if Aarian enjoys a show, I will not go and see it.
Yeah,
right.
That's how I know.
I
I'm still
musical
working out
theatre.
Josh's taste at the moment. I think me and Sam crossed over. I'm quite proud that you enjoyed that. Actually, I'm proud of my own recommendation. But yeah, our tastes are so.
Like I love musical theatre. I love a one-person show. I love something that's like really like, I don't know. I can't deal with like experimental stuff. It doesn't do it for me. The like metaphor and like weird shit don't do it for me. I'm sure like if it's for you, great. I'm not literal, please. But then Chloe will watch things and be like, I mean, there are certain things that we'll watch and we love. Like at Edinburgh, we both loved Boring Techno Makeout Jam.
Yeah,
that was my favorite thing I saw at the Fringe. It was amazing. I was just cackling the entire time, and I loved it.
There's some great directors around coming through as well. Like Diane Zora, I think, is really good. I think Ed Madden's really good. And like, there's a kind of group of Chelsea Walker's brilliant. Like, I think there's a group of people like finding their groove in a really exciting way. And I think with a lot of artistic directors just changing now, I think there's kind of an interesting moment coming with a lot of that. Sarah Joyce is making work in the UK again. She's been in Ireland for a while. I think she's really good. Like, yeah, so, you know.
And as a company, or I don't mind who answers this, but one thing you've really learnt from this, your debut show, something you might pass on to other people who are out there wanting to do this?
Don't plan for anything. Because we've failed upwards. This was an accident. Like, right, okay. Dreams are important. and having things that like you want to do are great, but like being open to whatever comes. So like I never, until really recently, never considered myself a writer. Like I was not a writer. I was an actor and a theatre maker. And like that was my thing. I'm not a script writer or a playwright. Like, and then I wrote a play or co-wrote a play, and then it got picked up, and then now it's been published, and I guess I'm a writer. But like, and it's sort of progress. Same as with the company, we didn't set out to make a company. If Sam had called me at the beginning of 2021 and said, I have an idea for a show and I want to form a theatre company that like is dealing with like at this point like pretty substantial sums from the Arts Council and like touring internationally and like just come back from Oslo and like we've got loads of people who are like where the company's paying, I would have been like, absolutely not. Like, I'm not interested in running the company. And definitely not with you and Chloe. Jesus Christ. But like, it's not like we've failed upwards. Like I said, that first opportunity was to develop. We just wanted to develop a show, but you had to be a new company. So we said, we're filling out the form and went, yeah, let's say we're a company. Our name is, it's an accident. Like Chloe, we were on Zoom filling out the form. It's a company name. Chloe was like, looked down and went, FlawBored. Sam went, let's spell it FalWBRED. And then it stuck. We got the thing. That's our company name. Our show name was, again, an accident. Like, it makes no relation to the show.
So what's the advice in this?
Yeah, there's no advice.
Don't expect, like, leave yourself open to things happening.
Yeah.
And don't plan, because there are some companies that
my advice would be totally different.
Okay, but there are some companies that work in terms of they go, we really want to make work together. We don't know what we want to make, but like we want to make the thing. We want to make something together. And some of them just they'll make an Instagram page, and then they will never make a show. Whereas we were the other way. We really wanted to make a show, and we only made a company when it was absolutely necessary.
I think, like on that though, I think I'd say don't take yourself and don't take the work too seriously.
Okay.
Like life is mad, and you can get into this kind of like real industry level of like stress and anxiety about, you know, that person's show is doing better than mine, and why has that person not replied to my email? And it's like you can really wear yourself out. And I think obviously it's coming from a privileged place of, you know, our show has done well and we're really grateful and really proud of that. But also, like, the minute you start taking it too seriously, you're going to wear yourself out, and you just have to have fun as much as you can, but also dig down into something that is, like, uniquely you and uniquely, like, interesting about the way that you see the world or you see this one specific thing. And it can't be something that comes easy. It can't be something that you know the answer to easy, that you could just sit there and be like, here you go, I wrote this play in like 2 months because I already knew what the answer was. Like, I think there's such in the way that we work, there feels like there's such a necessity to constantly be churning something out because otherwise you'll be forgotten about. But also there's such a value in sitting down. Oh, fuck, sorry. In sitting, I'm getting passionate now. Sitting down and like actually thinking about like what is at the center of this? What is at the heart of this? And if at the heart of it is just like, I saw a show in Edinburgh, Sheep Soup, House of Life, and they said, we wanted to make a show that made people happy. That's it. That was the only thing we wanted. But what they did really well was they dug right down into what does it mean to be happy, and what does it mean to spread joy, and how can we spread joy in art in a way that was so giving and not about the self. And so my advice is to just like, even if your subject doesn't feel that complicated, there's like so many ways that you could dig right down into it to make that show unique to you and clever and fun. And yeah.
Great. Did you want to finish off? We're probably going to have to
of course. I think actually mine is quite different, but I think both of what the guys just said is true. But I actually think there's, my advice to you, people getting going, is that the industry is very, very lazy about the way it makes work, and they haven't questioned a whole load of things. And you can find a really easy advantage by questioning those things. So if you look at the process of making a show, if you're running a football team, you look at every aspect of your process, and you look at how you can increase or maximize every single aspect of that, and then your football team is better. You don't rely on having a brilliant idea about your game the day before the final. And loads of people making shows rely on, I'll have a brilliant idea about my game halfway through rehearsal. Don't rely on that. prep it, work it out, work, iterate. Think. You need to do it in a way, like Chloe says, that's bearable. You need to do it in a way that doesn't stress you out. But like, if you maximize that process, you are immediately in the top 5% of people making work, because you're actually thinking about your process rather than just saying, oh yeah, I have a process. I don't mean like talk about it. I mean, work out what it is.
Mm-hmm. Great.
You can see why all three of us, or four of us, well, Sam's not here, but you know, very different answers.
Yeah, so Sam was here. He would just make some Australian noises. That's all you're missing.
Well, thank you guys. It's been really great talking to you today, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having us. Yeah, it's been great.
Thank you so much for joining us for this new season of the Make It Work podcast. To get more inspirational videos like this, hit the like or subscribe button. We put more info and behind the scenes stuff on our Instagram at Make It Work Podcast UK. And if you had any questions or comments about the show, you can email us at makeitworkpodcastuk@gmail.com.